Hello and welcome to That Nerd Thing, where we uncover the magical impact that fandoms have on our lives. I'm Morgan, and I'm so excited because today we are back for our part 2 episode with Matt Eicheldinger.
Wow.
So you may remember Matt as the author of the Matt Sprouts series, and we spoke about so many fun things in our last episode: Calvin and Hobbes, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, video games, writing, woodworking, just so much more. So if you missed that, I definitely recommend going back and checking out that episode. But I know so much has happened since that last episode, and I'm really excited to get into it. So thank you so much, Matt, for coming back on the show. It's always exciting that somebody actually wants to come back on. So thank you.
No problem. Like I said before, you're a fantastic interviewer, and this is fun just to like chat in a relaxed setting. You do a fabulous job. So happy to come back whenever.
Thank you. Oh, perfect.
As long as I'm entertaining enough.
Oh yeah, I will add you to my list like every I was going to say like every year, but I don't know how long I'll be doing this, but you'll be a recurring guest.
Oh, cool.
So what has been going on? I feel like you're all over the country. You're on TV. You're a New York Times best-selling author. Like so much has happened.
Yeah. So the last time we spoke was about a week before my book came out, which for listeners was an independently published book that then got picked up by a larger publisher. And it was kind of like my dream. It'd been like a 15-year journey pretty much to get that darn book published. And shortly after we met, it had been out for a week, and we learned that it was a USA Today and New York Times instant bestseller, which never saw that coming.
It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely insane. My editor called me, and I was in my bedroom, and my wife and I got to hear it together, and then we both cried. And then we were both like, what does that mean to be a New York Times bestseller? And so I would say the last year since you and I have talked roughly, that's what I've been trying to figure out. I was like, what does that actually mean for a career as an author? And my answer is I still don't know. But it's been a lot of fun to, like you said, I've been traveling a little bit more, doing keynote events for both, kids and adults. And it's just been a really wild, bizarre, fun last year.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. And since becoming a New York Times bestseller, like I said, I don't really know what that means for me and my family, but what it has meant professionally is I have signed other book contracts. And so I get to continue to write, which is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, being able to continue the dream that you set out to do. And I've expanded. It started in middle grade literature, and my first adult nonfiction novel came out. And
yes, I have it right here.
Oh, no way. Hey.
Of course. I pre-ordered it.
Did you? Oh,
I did.
Gosh. Thank you. I'm going to put you on the marketing team. We'll get you some kickbacks. And so far that book, that one also hit the USA Today bestseller list, which is insane to think about. That I've done of my 3 books that have come out, 2 of them have gotten notable recognition. And that book sent me on a mini book tour, which I'd never done before.
That's so cool.
It is. It's also exhausting. I don't know how like celebrities do that full time where they travel and do events. Like I did 3 stops of like land, get in the hotel, go do the event, fly out the next morning. And my body just feels beaten up. Like I still had a great time, but yeah, it was a gauntlet.
That's amazing. Yeah. And this book is so good. So what I love about it is I kind of like, books like these, I kind of don't like to read in order. I'll just randomly be like, what story should I like learn from today? And I'll just go to a random page and I'll read it and I'll like take a message from that. So cool. I think this is it's so good. And I was like, I need to meet you in person so you could sign it for me.
Cool. Yeah. It's, that's a book too, for listeners. It's a book of 100 very short stories. And when we talked about doing the book, another editor who I'd never worked with, her name is Jean, suggested maybe the stories are maybe a little bit longer. And I was like, well, I want to really keep them to the heart of the story. And the more pages you tell me to write, the more details that I'm going to include that just they're not needed. And so I'm glad that you are flipping to random stories because it was really hard to decide the order. And in the end, the order was kind of determined by the color of the pages of the interior. So like what color is the old? Yeah. So like if there is a page or a story called Blue Ice Cream, well, that one has to be blue, but it can't be next to another blue page. So that kind of determined the order eventually with a few minor tweaks here and there. But it's cool to hear that you just open up to a random one.
Yeah. And for listeners, it's called Sticky Notes, Memorable Lessons from Ordinary Moments. And I will definitely share the link to that in the show notes.
Thanks. Yeah. So if you don't know the history of the book, I've written something down every day from teaching, from my sixth grade teaching career. I wrote something down every day for about 15 years, usually multiple things. And they started at something silly and kind of matured as I matured as an adult into other stories. But it's been really cool to see how those stories resonate with people, because it's what I share online and kind of the foundation of my social media accounts. It's also neat to hear that, and something I never would have predicted is parents show these videos and this book to their kids. Didn't expect that at all. I thought I was writing an adult book, but it turns out parents really like to read through this with their kids. So who'd have thought?
Oh, that's amazing. So, what is it like for you now to still be doing social media content and writing?
It's kind of a weird balance.
Yeah.
I enjoy it. I think social media, the way that I approach it, forces me to write every day, which is good practice. Otherwise, I could get pretty lost in like trying to respond to DMs or other inquiries that come in. But when you have to tell a story, you have to first write it. At least that's how I do it. And so I
Hmm.
write most days. But posting online, I still have I don't want to say a love-hate relationship with it, but it's still a very bizarre landscape to navigate.
Yeah.
And I'm not even getting negativity. It's just the amount of inquiries and companies that want to just pitch their product through you without really understanding who you are or what you represent. That's been tricky to navigate.
Yeah. Social media. And it's also, I mean, it's exhausting for me. I'm like, I don't know how people do it every day. It's a lot.
It is a lot. And, right when I started, I felt really compelled to post every day, because when you
Yeah.
post every day, typically your following will kind of increase because you have content that's being pushed out. But I don't do that anymore. I only post when I feel inspired to post. And I guess that's a benefit of having a larger account. But if anyone
Mm-hmm.
was starting, I would tell them don't post every day. Like, I think the things that you post when you're inspired are the things that translate and grow a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've gotten some new book contracts, you said. So you're writing
Yeah.
more. Oh,
Yeah.
that's so exciting.
Yeah. So we have the Matt Sprouts series has two more books coming. Well, one that just came out, and then the third one comes out this summer. And then there's another book called Holes in My Underwear, which is illustrated poetry for kids.
Oh,
Yeah. Like,
I love that.
thank you. The my editor helped me come up with the title too. It was like we kind of came up with it together. I was like, "That's it. That's got to be it."
Yeah.
It's very much like Shel Silverstein, but as a
Mm,
teacher, I had to always find resources to teach with. You don't always get what you need,
mhm.
and so I created poetry for 15 years because I never had any. And the great thing about middle schoolers is they'll tell you what's good and what's not good real quick. So I would like read a poem. They're like, "That's horrible. Where'd you find that?" I'm like, "Oh, I didn't write it." and and then over time they would help me craft better ones. So that was really cool to illustrate. It felt like it seems very original to me, and I know that's
Yeah.
corny because everything people create is original, but it seems much more personal, even more so than my Matt Sprouts series, which is based on my life. And then, not everything that I've pitched has turned into a book, but it's cool to be in a space where people will hear my ideas and give me feedback.
Mm.
And so we think we have more contracts coming. I'm kind of trying to branch out into
Ooh.
some new genres. I pitched a apocalyptic series, which I think would be really fun.
Oh,
Yeah, I know, and that's where I feel like, speaking of nerd, I can put on my nerd hat, because with my
yes.
yes, with my Matt Sprout series, it's quirky, it's funny, it's childhood antics, but with a apocalypse that you get to create from scratch, I very much feel like I'm creating a video game. Like, I envision what it would be like
Mhm.
for character to, or a person to play that character that I'm writing about, and that's been fascinating too.
Is that going to be like YA?
I thought it would.
Okay.
I thought I could be a YA writer, and maybe there's still time for that. And as I was writing it, I was like, I don't have the vocabulary in me yet to like go to that next level. I very much write
Ah.
for middle grade, I think. I do think it'll do well in kind of both audiences. I think it'll be a book
Mhm.
that YA readers will pick up, and a book that
Mhm.
elementary readers will pick up. Even adults too, I think it'll resonate, but we'll see. We got to get the contract first.
Yeah, that's cool. And it's like building a world.
Yeah, and how fun. Like, I've never created a world before, because the worlds for my other books were based on my life. So you imagine where you grew up
Mm,
and you
mhm.
describe that. I've never played Dungeons and Dragons, but I very much
Mhm.
feel like, what's the person who runs it, who like creates
Is
the
it
world?
the dungeon master?
I think
I
you're
think.
right.
I hope so.
Yeah, I don't want to offend all the D&D players out there. But that's kind of what I feel like is, as I write, I get to create new elements, and that can be intimidating because creating a new world, you're creating from scratch. but I pull from other things that, inspire me. Like I love the video game and the series The Last of Us. Are you familiar?
Mm-hmm. I'm familiar with it,
Okay,
yes.
it's one of the best video games I've ever played, just storyline alone.
Yeah.
And so I pull a lot of visuals from games like that where it's like, oh, I felt really immersed in this game I was playing. How can I make that into like translate that feeling into a book?
Oh, that's so cool. That reminds me of, have you read Ready Player One?
Oh, love it.
Yeah, I
Love
love
it.
that book too.
Did you see
Yeah,
the movie as well?
I did.
I
Yeah.
I saw that, or I read the book and saw the movie too far apart from each other, so I couldn't really remember how to compare them. Did you like one more than the other?
I definitely like the book more.
Okay. I'm gonna have to
Because I
reread the
think the
book.
movie, it felt a little bit more like it was focusing on the visuals and the action, and you don't
Hmm.
need that necessarily in a book, I
No.
think.
I need something to read, so it's probably gonna be it's probably gonna be this.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I see you have, I just can't help but I'm looking around at your setup behind you. I love it.
Thank you. I actually have a desk now. I just got a desk for the first time. When I was putting my book out a year ago, I only sat in a like half broken IKEA chair. And so now I have an actual like desk and then all my quirky things.
I love it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't tilt my computer too much, but yeah,
That's
built the
okay.
shelves and filled with, you know, stuff that inspires me from when I was a kid. There's Kirby and Pokemon and Spider-Man and you name it. It's very much
Love
a
it.
childhood corner.
What are you currently nerdy about?
Ooh, well, last time we talked, it was like you said, Ninja Turtles. So since I've been writing a lot, I can't do complete silence. I need some sort of background noise that's calm and not distracting. So music or instrumental music. But the nerd part of it is I've gotten really into music that is based on the video game. So like piano version of
Oh,
Zelda, right? Or even Mario, like people who change the pace and the cadence of it. It's been really cool. I've gone down some rabbit holes for sure of like, okay, I listened to this version of, oh, what's it called? Just the, what do you call like the main song of a video game?
the theme song?
The theme, thank you. Like, okay, if I listen to a theme song of a certain video game in piano, I'll then go try and find it in violin or acoustic
Oh, wow.
guitar. Yeah, and the great world of YouTube and TikTok, it
Mm-hmm.
exists. Like I have yet
Mm-hmm.
to get stumped, you know? And so that's been cool, especially if I'm writing from a childhood perspective, right? And I put on these things that have a little bit of an adult theme now because they are now classical music compositions. It makes me feel a little more mature. But that's definitely one thing that I've been nerding out about is music.
Oh, I love that. And that's so true. Music is so powerful. Sometimes I'll go from work to doing the podcast and I'm like, okay, I need to get out of my therapist brain and back into my nerd brain and I'll listen to like the Back to the Future theme song or just, another movie like
Right.
E.T. or Jaws. I guess I love Universal movies, but all those theme
Yeah.
songs to get into the zone.
Well, it's true. And they invoke, previous memories too. So if you had a good connection
Mm.
with that 5, 10 years ago, you get that same feeling. And so, if I get the chance to write this apocalyptic series, you better believe that I'll be listening to music of like these video games that I've played that are apocalyptic or even I've never been through an apocalypse. So I don't have like music that I would attribute to that, but it's definitely something that I'll explore. Like as I write, what does that tone feel like? And what would be the background music if you were
Oh,
reading this
cool.
book? Yeah.
I hope you write that down and like maybe if it's associated with different chapters to maybe eventually like tell people, hey, when you read this chapter, this is what I was listening to. I think that could be like a cool behind the scenes
That would
look.
be cool. I've seen a book that was for young adults. It has like a cassette on the front. Or actually, I think it's poetry. It's poetry. And the author at the beginning says you should be listening to this song when reading this poem.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So it would be a neat element to include, even if it were by chapter, to be like, as you read this
Yeah.
chapter, dude, I don't know what the licensing rights are for that. But, but it would still be a unique idea for sure. I don't know if I've seen that anywhere else besides that one cassette book.
I've seen a lot of adult fiction books have like a playlist. They're like, oh, this is the playlist of the book.
Oh,
So
that's cool.
maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any TV shows or movies or anything you've seen in the past few months that you've really nerded out about? Or is your entire world consumed now by being an author?
It's pretty consumed by being an author, but
Yeah.
I do need to relax, and so oftentimes the thing that I watch defaults to what my kids want to watch.
Hmm.
So a lot of cartoons and Disney. I feel like this is still nerdy, but we've gotten really into baking shows, which
Oh, cool.
if you've never watched are like the most relaxing maybe not Hell's Kitchen, but I'm talking like baked goods. And
Yeah.
so the Great British Bake Off we watch as a
Hmm.
family, and I just feel like like someone's giving a massage and I'm just like sinking into the couch. Like it's so positive and so relaxing. And of course, it's one of those shows where you're watching, you're like, oh, I could have done better having no background in
I
baking.
know.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So that's definitely one. I'm trying to think of a recent. Oh, I know. Since I've been flying more, I did a mini book tour. I got to watch movies that I wanted to watch. And so I watched Mad Max for the first
Okay.
time.
I have not seen it.
Okay, I haven't seen the old ones. There's like ones from the 70s. I watched
Hmm.
there's like 2009 and then the most recent one. And I would compare it to Dune. Like visually it was stunning. And it's interesting because those both of those movies, they don't span a lot of time. It's like only a couple days. So you're watching only a couple days of this narrative, but it's done so well with these chase scenes, you just feel completely immersed. So I nerded out big time when I was on the plane.
Oh, cool. I could see that almost like inspiring this new apocalyptic book series that you're thinking about.
Yeah, my apocalyptic book series is a flood, and that inspiration came while we were camping and it was pouring rain, and we weren't it wasn't flooded, but I was like, huh, it'd be interesting if a kid was 13 and trapped. I wonder what that would look like.
Sounds terrifying.
Yeah, it does sound terrifying. Yeah, I would talk more about it, but I can't give
I
spoilers
know, I know, I know.
for something that
I,
doesn't exist yet.
how do you deal with that uncertainty of like not knowing, like when you pitch things and not knowing if it's going to go through?
Yeah, not well, I'll tell you that. So
Yeah.
only because I'm a planner, not because I feel like disrespected or like they're judging my work or anything like that. I really do believe that in order to create a good book, it takes more than just the author. You need
Hmm.
an editor who can jump into your head and get right there with you and also bring new perspectives. And I feel really lucky to have the editor that I do, Erin, because she can jump in there so well. And so the idea of writing a book like that with her is really intriguing to me, but it is hard to. I haven't really had to write the full book before my book project has been picked up. So like I've had 5 books come out. The only book that I've written the whole thing before we pitched it was my original independent book. And so
Wow.
oftentimes people I think would assume that I'm at home writing future books. So far not really. The way that I work is I create basically a one sheet pitch of
Hmm.
here's what I think it's going to look like, here's where the plot is, and then I might write the first couple chapters. And so I know that that's kind of rare. And if I were to take that somewhere else outside of my publisher, they'd be like, let's see the book. But I've established enough of a relationship where I can pitch ideas and they know that I can deliver on those. But that also means that I know at some point I'm going to have to write a full book in order to then pitch it. And that's kind of weird to do
Yeah.
all that work and know that it might not result in anything.
Yeah, I imagine that that's very difficult and would be very disappointing if it didn't result in
Yeah,
anything.
and but that's like the normal thing about being an author too. Like, and
Yeah.
I understand that now. Is I was very lucky to have gotten book projects by pitching ideas after the first one was so successful. But I also know that the author balance that I have right now will probably change in the future. So like right now, my day consists of posting to social media, dealing with inquiries, and maybe like 15% of being an actual writer. I know that
Hmm.
that's going to flip. At some point, I'm going to be writing way more than I am doing any of those other things. And that comes in waves right now. Like if I get a book contract, then I will be writing for a very, for months. But in terms of like writing when you don't have a contract, it's very, very strange. But I understand that that's how it has to work.
Yeah, this is so interesting. It reminds me of, so I've interviewed a couple of times on the show also Nick Walker. He's a Broadway actor. He played
Yeah.
Aaron Burr in Hamilton.
Yeah.
And he was also sharing like his experience of going between shows and how it's almost like there's an uncertainty period of not knowing what's going to be next, but knowing that something will be next. But the emotions at each stage of the process are so different. It's so fascinating what, like hearing that.
Yeah, it gives you a real appreciation for other artists, right? Like
Yeah.
in all aspects, whether you're a potter, a wood carver, whatever it is that you're creating, you always have to create first. And it gives you like, so now when I go through art shows and I'm looking at all these pieces or even musicians, I'm like, wow, I know how much time you had to put into that piece without knowing its future. And that's got to be really hard, especially when you are dealing with people who want to create when they're inspired. Like there's different, right? Like if you are
Yeah.
contracted to do something versus you're just creating based on your own feeling, gut feeling, those are very different worlds to be in. So like being an actor, I
Mhm.
can't, that would be very difficult to not know what the next play is and how do you prepare and do you change your pitch? And yeah.
Yeah. So last time we spoke, I know we spoke about the difference between, being a teacher and then being an author.
Yeah.
But now that some time has passed, what is that like? Like, are you, and if you don't want to talk about this, that's okay too. But I'm wondering,
Cool.
like, do you feel burnt out?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't feel burnt out at all. What I do feel is I feel like the gears aren't smooth yet, right? So like
Mm.
I
Mm-hmm.
feel clunky only
Mm-hmm.
because I haven't found like a good I feel like I don't know the rhythm of being a full-time author. And I realize that that's very rare. Like the more authors I meet, the more I realize, oh, you do like 8 other things. You're an author, you do some freelance work, you do public speaking, you do paid appearance, like whatever it is. And so I'm trying to figure out like what will my thing be? Like, will I just get to write? Will I be doing keynote events? The book Sticky Notes that came out has really opened up this new world of like keynote speaking. And so I've been doing a lot of that with educators. And I think that's the biggest difference. I'm definitely not burnt out. I love what I'm doing. I absolutely love
That's
it.
amazing.
Yeah, I don't know how to make it very efficient. I once saw there was another author and he had like this spreadsheet on his desk and he was color coding how much time he spent on certain things. So at the end of the day, he could see where most of his time went. And I wonder if that's something I need to start doing to really get an idea of where my good energy should go. And when I don't have as much energy, what should I be doing then?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, oh yeah, totally. Just like I totally get it because like when you're full of energy, this is what you want to do. But when you're maybe like a little lesser, not as much, these are the sorts of things you would want to do. I get that.
Yeah. So I think it'll change in this next year. I told my wife and I've told my editor and my agent, I feel like I am a breath away from realizing that this is something I can do for not just a couple years. I might be able to do this
Mm,
maybe more like a decade and the way that I'm doing it now. And it just really depends on a variety of factors. It depends on what sort of advance you get on a book contract. It depends on
mm-hmm,
how your other books are doing. I am lucky in that the books that I've put out are doing moderately well. Like they're bringing
mm-hmm,
in income for the company. And the reality is of being a first time debut author, most authors, their first book doesn't pass their advance. And so it's hard to grow a brand as a debut author. And I'm lucky that I have kind of a brand going. I just have to
mm-hmm.
figure out what does that brand look like and how do I present that to people?
Well, I think what you were saying about like you only post on social media if you feel inspired, and I think,
Yeah.
like you said, that comes across to people being genuine, being yourself, being authentic, and I think that it seems to me like that's your brand.
Thank you. That's what I like to think, but I also don't like to talk about myself. So what has been the hardest too is being an author, there's two spaces that you have to live in. There's like Matt who visits public schools, and then there's this
Mm,
keynote Matt who meets with companies. They pay and offer very differently. It's very different. And so it's a hard space to navigate. And it's very tempting just to say, to raise your own price and say, this is what I'm going to charge for everybody. And I think some people can do that. I can't. I think the long game is this in this industry for me,
mm-hmm,
and the way that I want to approach it is being genuine and being
mm,
flexible. And I feel like if you do that, that's what people remember more. They're not going to remember that you were cheap or that you were expensive. They're going to remember that when you were there, you gave them your full attention, that you were enjoyable, and it was a good experience for everybody. And I feel like if you do that, then that message spreads a lot further than those other things. And so that's the feedback I've gotten so far. I think it can be tempting to do other things like paid sponsorships and all that stuff. But I've said this before too. When my kids are older, I don't want them to see all of that stuff. I want them to see that dad was doing this in a way that represented himself well and his family.
mm-hmm.
And so far, I've stuck to that. I haven't done any paid sponsorships. I am very flexible when it comes to meeting with schools and finding a price that works for both of us. Same thing for big companies too. Like I'm not out here to gouge anyone. I just want to continue telling stories, and I don't have to make a ton of money. I just want to make enough to where I can do this comfortably. And the bar is pretty low for the price because I was a public school teacher. So like what I was getting paid wasn't comparatively to what I've seen other people pay, it's not great. But if I can live in this space of being a storyteller for a while, that would just be a lot of fun.
Wow, it's just so wild how much you've done since we last met. Like I saw you just shared on Instagram before this interview. You were just on TV. I think you've been on TV a few times, like interviews, like legit
Yeah,
things.
legit things. There was this one was the Jason show, which is filmed here in Minneapolis, but then I didn't even know until like a day before that it's like national. so so we went on this morning, and it's cool to see that other people, I know this sounds corny, but like when you post on social media so much, you lose sense that you're known outside of your area. So when I do travel and when I do talk shows and then I get messages from people across the country, they're like, I just saw you on the Jason show. Like, that's crazy. I exist outside of my own little bubble here in the Twin Cities area. It's kept me busy, all these interviews, podcasts, but they're fun too. They are fun. Like, I don't feel stressed going on
Mhm.
shows like that. I don't feel the need to put on a different persona. And that's what's also been great is I know many social media accounts, people have to change a little bit of who they are in order to
Yeah.
post. And I feel like I haven't had to do that. And
That's amazing.
yeah, well, I'm lucky because people latched on to who I am. And I tell that to everyone people who are trying to grow their audience. And I think I said this last time is your audience is out there for who you are. It just might take a
Mhm.
while for people to find you. And I think it's worth the wait when people find each other and have a true connection. It's way better than coming on a TV show or Instagram and putting on a happy, cheery face every day. Like that's not reality. But yeah, it's been fun to connect with people in that way.
Yeah. So in terms of fandoms, are
Yeah.
there any like fandoms or nerdy things that you haven't been involved in, but maybe you're curious about and you would love to learn more about?
Yeah, so I got lucky enough. I went to Salt Lake City Library, which if you live in Salt Lake City and you're listening to this, your library is incredible. It looks like a spaceship. It's all glass on the inside. It's got
Ooh,
glass elevators. Like it was really cool.
that
But
sounds really cool.
yeah, but while I was there, I got to meet up with a former teammate from college. I ran track. He lives in the Twin Cities. We just don't see each other that often, but he was in Salt Lake City. He is really big into Comic Con. I have never
Mm.
been to one. I don't know much about it. And so we went out to dinner and got to chat a while. And I was just pummeling him with questions. I'm like, who do you like to dress up as? Like, what? And I'm just learning that there's like Comic Con is like an umbrella. And there's all these things underneath of like all these subgroups that meet in different cities and
Mhm.
do smaller conventions for kids. I had no idea. I thought it was just like, here's a Comic Con at the event center, and then that's it. So that's something that I'd really like to learn more about, not because I think I would ever write for that sort of thing. Like I don't foresee my works being in a Comic Con or people dressing up as my character. I mean, maybe someday. But it's really cool to see people take something and slightly tweak it. Like taking a Power Rangers outfit but merging it with Pokemon and dressing up like that. Like it's creative. You're not just dressing up as the thing you admire, you are modifying it to your own tastes. And I'm understanding why so many people enjoy going to these things after talking with him. Have you been before?
I have not to like the big Comic Con, but I've been to smaller, more local ones. I actually just went a few months ago and it was so amazing. I met David Tennant from Doctor Who.
Yeah,
Yeah,
cool.
I that was so cool. I was like, I really want him on my podcast. He's like my dream guest. I don't think he'll be on it. I mean, maybe eventually. But I was like, you know what? I oh no, I'm only gonna have a few seconds to say hi, get
Yeah.
like a picture or whatever. So I wrote a letter, and I gave him the letter. Who knows if he'll ever read it? But it was cool to meet him. But those things you have to like be ready to stand around.
Oh,
They're
really?
long days.
Okay. Yeah, I was trying to get a sense of. I had students who would go with like their parents, and I
Hmm.
never could really understand what you do aside from going to someone's panel event and like listening to
Yeah.
characters that are in sitcoms or Marvel movies. But I'm getting a sense that like if you enjoy Spider-Man, there's always like these subgroups of like I'm going to be at this Comic Con. Any Spider-Man fans, let's meet here, and then they do, and then they all get to take pictures and
Yeah.
it's just like I said, the umbrella is really large, and I can't even tell you subcategories, but it's been cool to learn about.
Yeah, years and years ago, when the Harry Potter theme parks opened up in Orlando, I went to, I think it was called Infinitus. It was a Harry Potter convention, and
Okay.
it was so much fun just because everybody loved the same thing. And I just remember getting in the elevator with somebody. I felt it's like I'm in the elevator with Snape. It's so
Yeah,
fun. So speaking of Spider-Man, because I can't help, like, that's Spider-Man in the background, right?
it is. Yep. Yeah.
Is Spider-Man one of your favorite nerdy things?
It was when I was a kid, and I actually need to.
Okay.
That's a Lego build from a box,
Oh,
but I
cool.
need to put my. I have one from my childhood that's made of wood. It's probably worth money. Like I've tried to find it online, I can't. But it's all beat up. But I've been a Spider-Man fan for a long time, but I never read the comics. It was always just like
Mhm.
cartoon versions.
Have you seen the most recent live action movies with Tom Holland?
Oh yeah, yep. Seen
Okay.
those. I've seen the animated ones, which are gorgeous.
Hmm.
The storylines are great
Oh
too, but
yeah.
I really like some good animation. It's so unique. So big Spider-Man fan here. Going back to Comic Con, the other thing that I've gone down rabbit holes of, like if I have a half hour before bedtime and I just want to scroll social media, people who design those costumes, that's like really cool. When people show you the behind the scenes build and they're like,
Yeah.
"Hi, like I'm a doctor who does brain surgery, but I also like building full full scale replicas of this." And you're like, what?
It's
It
amazing.
really is just all these people that you would never know like design this stuff. I saw someone do a complete build of a Marvel character. Oh, the Juggernaut. This Juggernaut is a really massive guy, completely out of foam, and they had never done it. They just watched some YouTube tutorials and like
Hmm.
came out great. And it's like that's really neat. Like you didn't just show up to a Comic Con, which is fine if you do, but you you put in a lot of time and energy for your passion, and that's to me equally as impressive as someone building a pot. Like you're
Oh
taking
yeah.
time for your craft, and it's enjoyable to you. And I'm glad there's a place for those people to go celebrate that stuff.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's so much fun. Is there anything else that you're currently nerding out about?
I guess I've been really just into nostalgia. So I know that
Oh.
that's most of what I think being a nerd is all about is connecting to things that you enjoyed when you were younger. But I'm really into this the full immersive experience. So like I saw a guy online who completely redid his living room, like his 90s living room. Like he had a picture from the 90s of his living room growing up and he rebuilt it that way. And as soon as I saw the build, I was like, I had instant comfort. You know,
Wow.
like it was like you were stepping back into your childhood more than just looking at a toy. It was it was all the senses. Like he had like the orange and brown carpet. He had the entertainment center for the TV that's all made of wood and really boxy. He had the old school Nintendo. He had like a original popcorn machine. Even like the chairs that were in there. I'm like, I think we had that chair growing up. And
So fascinating.
yeah, and then
Wow.
of course the next video, and this could be a whole nother podcast if you want to talk about artificial intelligence. This guy was he's a graphic designer, and he created an app using AI where he's giving a tour of his house, and with the press of the button, it changes the skin of the entire house. So I'm going to send it to you. So he's walking through his house, and then he hits a button to be 1950s, and as he's reaching for his fridge, the whole fridge changes. It's the same shape, it looks the same, but the color scheme is different. It looks like that classic like metallic handles with like
Uh-huh.
neon green cover. And then he switched it to horror movie and the lights were all of a sudden gone from his camera and it was only illuminating things as if his phone was a flashlight. And then he changed it to like an apocalyptic like house that hasn't been lived in years. He went to his bed and it looked like the bed was covered in dust. Like it was what I was talking about except with technology instead of actually building a physical space. So it made me, and I went down like
Wow.
this rabbit hole of like, oh, like people with dementia, maybe they can use something like this to reconnect with where they grew up. And then I went the other way of like people living in an alternate reality of where they actually live, because if you're not happy
Yeah.
with the things around you, you could just create a new skin and then your house is completely different. It was kind of
Wow.
like a mind game. It was very bizarre.
This feels way deeper than just changing the surface.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. To
wow.
me, it was more. It was because there's fear with that too. There was an element of fear that I felt watching that I don't get when I watch like AI created people. Like I know that's going to get
Hmm.
scary good real quick. Like it's already pretty good, but you can tell like people's faces. But that one, I was like, I think if you were to show me not the start of that with the person saying like, this is a skin of a house that I'm walking through, I would have never known. And
Wow.
the applications of that are too hard for me to like conceptualize, like
Yeah,
what are the
yeah.
impacts of that? But yeah, so that was probably the nerdiest thing I've seen as of late.
That's really cool. I love science fiction, so I'm so
Mm,
fascinated and intrigued by that. But I mean, I love science fiction, so I'm also afraid when I hear of things like that.
right? Yeah, what's coming down the pipeline is obviously unpredictable, but also that there's going to be layers of fear embedded in it, and I don't know, it's going to be bizarre.
Yeah. Are you still what is it woodworking? Like
Yes,
with your little people? Oh, okay.
I am. I've got one of. Let's see if I can turn here. Is he visible? There's one
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah.
Yes. So I haven't had as much time. I think when I did it
Yeah.
last, is I was in this like high and low of time. So
Mhm.
like I would go write one book, and then I had to wait for the edits to come back. And this
Mm.
year's been a little different, but I've made those creatures for every family member.
Oh, I love
um, yep, I
that.
bought some more woodworking tools so that I could be more efficient because I was like creating characters and it would take me 4 hours, and I'd see someone do one online, a different character in like 30 minutes. I'm like, oh, I think this one knife isn't going to cut it. So yeah, I haven't done it as much, but it is a really good outlet when I am tired
Mhm.
of looking at my own face on a screen for Instagram, or if I need a break from writing. It really does kind of reset me. And then I can listen to music too, like I was talking to you about.
Mhm.
My kids even tried it a couple times. So maybe there's some whittling Eichelldingers here in the future.
That's the word, whittling. I knew I was like,
Yeah.
there's
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
okay.
Yeah. Woodworking sounds like I'm making furniture. No, I'm whittling tiny little
There we
things.
go.
Tiny little things. Yeah. But it's nice to have like a space to display things too. Like I said, I've never had a
Yeah.
desk. So to like look at the things that I've created or inspired me is also really fun.
Amazing. So what has been over the last few months the most surprising part of this journey so far?
That's a really good question. I haven't been
Oh,
asked that
thank
one
you.
yet. What's the most
Ooh,
surprising?
really?
No, because the most common question I get is, "Are you going back to teaching?" And I
Right.
understand why people would ask that, and I'm planning to. I just because I can't predict what's going to even happen next year. I would say the most surprising thing about being an author is realizing how many talented people are out there that don't get a shot, or talented
Mm.
authors that have had their shot, had a really successful book, and can't get another shot. That's been really
Mhm.
surprising. Like I've met some authors in the Twin Cities and outside the Twin Cities who have had like National Book of the Year finalists, and they maybe like 4 years ago, and they haven't had a book contract since. And that is terrifying for me because it makes
Yeah.
me wonder,
Yeah.
am I at my peak right now? you know, it's
Yeah.
it can be a little unsettling to think about that, but it also makes me feel even more appreciative of the position that I'm in. And I like that I've had a long journey to get here because I don't feel like it was handed to me. Like I did 15 years of trying and ended up trying it myself. So in that way, I feel like I've earned it. Not to say that others
Mhm.
haven't if they've spent less time, but I don't feel like I just appeared out of nowhere. But to see some of these authors whose books I've read, knowing that they don't have anything coming, is just strange and it's surprising. It's also surprising to me too. I thought being a New York Times bestseller meant that you would kick your feet up and money just rolls in
Mhm.
and you're set for a while. The reality is it does get you a lot of exposure. It makes you, it's like makes you more reputable, I guess,
Mhm.
in some sense. But what that has meant for me isn't what I thought it meant, what I thought it would mean 5 years ago when I had dreams about being a New York Times bestseller. It's just not what I thought it would be. It's not bad at all. It's just not what I would have predicted.
Yeah, so this really requires you to be okay living in the moment and also kind
Yes.
of like trusting in yourself to handle whatever comes next.
Yeah, and like we said, that can be scary. But I think if I
Yeah.
wouldn't have had a tale of perseverance and like knowing what it feels like to not make it for a really, really long time, sitting in these what I think are very temporary moments of not knowing what's coming next is like nothing compared to what I've been through. So I have to remind myself too that this is now part of the process. You need to learn to be comfortable with not knowing what's coming next. And that can
Oh,
be,
yes.
yeah, and it can be really hard. But a lot of people don't understand too is like when you are rejected, whether it's once or twice, those are all steps of you moving forward. It just doesn't
Mm-hmm.
feel like it, especially when it deals with something that's so close to your heart or your soul, is you feel like, oh, people are rejecting who I am and my idea. But really it's all these no's are, you can use them to really fine tune what you want
Mm-hmm.
to do. And so as I've had book contracts, I've never actually been like outright said, this is a bad idea. I've gotten feedback of, I like this idea, let's tweak it. And those little glimmers of hope of like, oh, they're interested. Those are good for the slower days.
I bet.
But you nailed it. Being needing to be comfortable with the unknown is definitely part of what I'm a part of now.
Yeah. Is that kind of like a new thing for you to have to learn?
It's been a huge learning curve because
Yeah.
my wife and I are both planners. I was in a job
Mhm.
that got a paycheck on the same day, whenever that day was. I'm not the financial guy of our house, so I actually didn't know when I was getting paid. But yeah, it's just been an adjustment. And there
Yeah.
were early on when I only had my 2 book deal, there was a lot of stress of what would happen next. But now that I've settled in a little bit, it still feels clunky. But I'm starting to see what the rhythm can be. And I've had a chance to have some great mentors come along out of nowhere. I'm going to pronounce his name, but Jarrett Krauskovo. I just butchered his last name. I have to see it in order to say it. He's a National Book of the Year finalist. He had his book, Hey Kiddo. It's a graphic novel. He's been doing this since MySpace was around, utilizing social media to sell books. He's
Wow.
fabulous. You should have him on. He creates great content. He's been a
Oh,
wonderful,
yeah.
yeah, I'll put your name in. He's been a wonderful mentor. Unofficially, I'm going to call him my mentor. Jarrett, you're my mentor. He'll just send me a text message every once in a while, giving me a piece of advice. And, he is in a space with like Jeff Kinney, Diary of a Wimpy Kid. That's the type of author he is. So to show me, a new guy, the ropes is really valuable. And I've kind of held on to every word that he said of, oh, that's probably what I should do. Also because he's just like an upstanding citizen.
Hmm.
Like I really respect what he's done and what he stands for. But that's been really crucial to understand what this space is like. Because as much as I have a social media, this is a very lonely job outside of the time that
Mm-hmm.
I get to meet with I love when I get to meet with my editor and my agent, because those are the only people I talk to, and then podcasts too. These are highlights of my day. Otherwise, I have to live in my own head, and that can be a gymnastics battle in its own.
That's a really good point. People don't realize how lonely creating can really be.
Yeah, some authors prefer that. Like some authors
Mm-hmm.
would love just to sit, write, give their book to the publisher, and then start writing the next one. But the reality of selling books these days is the author has to do a lot of work to sell their books. They need to be
Yeah.
visible, they need to be out there. And I have that personality, so that's easier for me. But even so, when my family's gone, especially these Minnesota winter days coming up, and I am just
Mm.
alone in my house, there's no one to hold me accountable if I'm off
Mm-hmm.
task. There's no one to tell me how to do things, as I have to make all those decisions and try and be confident in all of them. And I've definitely seen myself grow in confidence in both writing and making executive choices in the last year. But it's still something that I need to learn and grow. And that's applicable to anyone who has to spend a lot of time by themselves.
Yeah. Sounds very different than being a teacher where it seems like everything is told to you.
Yes, or being in charge of other people.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
I used to help manage 30 little humans every hour, every minute of the day.
Whew.
And then now I manage myself. Turns out managing myself, I think, is a little harder than managing kids, because I have to set a standard of production. And if I don't meet that, there's no one to be
Yeah.
like, hey Matt, let's try and be better tomorrow. Like it's just me.
What are you doing maybe to nerd out in the coming months? Anything you're looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, both my kids have gotten into video games, so I enjoy watching them play. That's fun. I really do think I'm going to go really nerdy if I get a contract for this apocalyptic series.
Oh,
Like I can't we're going to
yes.
have to do another one where maybe you can help me build the world, but I'm so
Ooh.
incredibly I'm just really looking forward to trying something new, and this will be very different from anything that I've done. Outside of writing though, I'm trying to think of what I might be doing. I don't know. When it gets cold here in Minnesota, you're kind of locked in to inside. So a lot of electronic things will pop up. Like I haven't played video games very much. I'm sure I'll buy some new ones and dive in. There's a lot of indie games being put out there, like much smaller, cheaper games that are maybe only an hour worth of content, but they're just so well done. It's an art form on its own. So I enjoy playing these, like I said, with a new lens of like, oh, you had to create a world and the algorithm to like make all this work. Like, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't think of anything else. What about you though?
Ooh. Let's see. Well, right now I'm watching Agatha All Along. I don't know
Oh
if you.
yeah. I haven't gone. Sorry to interrupt. I haven't gone
Oh,
into
go
like
ahead.
these sub series a lot on Disney.
Okay.
Like the spin-offs
Hmm.
of. I think the only one I really watched was Loki, but I haven't done the other ones. So you liking it so far?
Yes, my favorite thing to come out of the MCU so far. I
That's a high
It's so good.
bar. I think that's going to be my new thing. Then that's going to be my
Yeah.
winter nerd out.
Watch WandaVision first.
Oh really? Okay.
Yes.
I heard that one's kind
Yes.
of like that's a thinker. Is it a thinker? Like in terms of what's
Yeah.
going? Okay.
Yeah. It's good. It's really good.
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
you'll like it. I think so. So yeah, WandaVision and then Agatha All Along. And what else am I doing? So I just I just went to the Taylor Swift concert, and so I kind of put a lot of things on pause while I was kind of like listening to all the music to kind of prep, because she does surprise songs.
Got to be
And so I was
ready.
like, yes, that's so I feel like all of my attention was for that for a very long time. So now I have time to do other
So
things.
let me ask you a question. How were the 3 days before you attended the concert? Could you feel like, were you anxious? Were you like couldn't sleep? Like what's the feeling of knowing you're going to witness one of the greatest musical talents of our generation? What was it
So
like?
I know it. So I actually was fortunate enough. I got a code, so I was able to get tickets at face value last year for third row floor seats.
Shut up. What?
I know. I know. So two of my nieces, they have a podcast all about Taylor Swift. So,
Okay.
and they made it a week-long event before the concert. We went to
My
get
gosh.
merchandise the Wednesday before. She was like, they were like, yeah, you have to line up because people line up for hours. And I was like, just to buy t-shirts? And they were like,
Yeah.
yeah. So we went there, and it was a whole thing. We planned our outfits. They made social media like clips to post. So it was amazing.
That's awesome. I had when she came when it was announced she was going to be here in the Twin Cities during all that
Uh-huh.
ticket debacle, right?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
I would say this is a conservative estimate. I bet I had 10% of my students not come to class that day. And I teach 120 kids. So do the math. And what they did is they sat on a computer in the line as their parents worked. That was their job. They just sat there. And some of them didn't get the tickets. And then they'd come to,
I know.
and then it's like heartbreak. Like girls would come back and boys would come back. Oh, we got tickets. And they're like, I sat for 8 hours. I didn't get any tickets.
I
But I'm
know.
glad that you got some. And so the experience was it totally immersive and
Oh yeah,
unforgettable.
it was so
Yeah.
amazing. She's an amazing performer for sure.
We watched
Yeah.
just like they did it was a Netflix or someone
Oh
did like
yeah.
a behind the scenes or concert tour. And it just, I mean, there's no break for her. Like she's just out there singing and dancing. It's like, you don't even need to
Oh
work
yeah.
out, Taylor. Like, holy smokes.
I know.
You
I
probably have a
know.
six pack just dancing.
And so, and she was in Miami, Florida, two of her shows, pouring rain, and she did it. She didn't stop. She didn't cancel. She did it.
I think if I were to have to write outside and people were like, we're going to watch Matt write and it started pouring rain, I'd be like, bye. Like, I don't need to catch a cold. But
Yeah.
man, what a juggernaut of an industry that is. Well, cool. I'm glad you got to go. That's
Oh
awesome.
yeah. Thank you. I haven't spoken about it on the podcast yet, so that was kind of fun.
Nice. I'm trying to think of
Yeah.
the last concert I went to. My brother's a videographer, so occasionally we'll get tickets. I got to see like One Republic. That was kind of
Oh,
cool.
cool. Yeah.
I'm a big Matt Carney fan. I don't know if you're familiar. He's like acoustic
No.
contemporary. So I did the benefit of having large social media is sometimes I'll try and push like throw my weight around. So I did a video for Matt and I was like, I only illustrate to your music. It would be great to meet you. And the management team just got back to me and they're like, oh, send us some books for Matt so we can give it to his kids and we'll send you some merch. So that was cool.
Oh, yay. That's
And
exciting.
yeah, and we might get to meet at some point when he comes through. But yeah, I guess that's my Taylor Swift.
Yeah, that's awesome. No,
Yeah.
but I love it. You reached out. I think I have so many people that are like, "Wow, you reached out to ask this person to be on the show, on the podcast." I'm like, "Yeah, why not? Worst they'll say is no."
Yeah. And you know what? I think a lot of people are willing to say yes. Like it's and maybe because a lot of people assume they're not being asked, so they don't get as many inquiries as they think. So occasionally I'll get an inquiry and they're like, I'm sure you'll never see this, but it's like, oh no, I'm seeing it. Like I'm trying to be in control of everything that's coming at me.
Yeah.
But it's fun to connect with new people too.
So, okay, I'll give a little sneak peek. Next year, I'm like trying to change up the podcast a bit. I'm going to focus a little bit more on the impact of like nerdiness and the fandoms on like our mental health. Just going to get a little bit more into that. So, I'm going to ask you back on, next year. Hopefully you'll say yes.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
What like message would you want to share to your future self?
Ooh, for let's say maybe 6 months to a year, or 3 months from now.
Yeah, 3 to 6 months, not a year. I don't want to wait a year.
Oh no, I would say to future me, future Matt, if you are the same as you are now, you're going to be just fine. There is no need to chase anything. There is no need to add pressure to your shoulders. Just being exactly who you are in this moment is fine for the future. That's what I would say.
Love that. I think that's really important.
Thank you.
And maybe you'll have seen Agatha all along.
maybe, and maybe I'll be better because of it. Who knows?
Is there anything else that you want to share before we wrap up?
No, this has been fabulous. I love talking about things that I don't get to normally talk about in my house, nerdy things, fandoms. I'll come better prepared next time because I'm sure I'm going to leave this and think, oh, I wish I would have told her about this. But I'll take some notes over what I do deep dives in because that's part of being a nerd and doing fandoms is there's always something new around the corner that you can dive into. And so I'm sure on the slower days, I will have some more stuff to talk about. So,
this was great. And again, these part 2 episodes, and I'll share it with listeners too. Like these are more of an experiment. I haven't kind of figured out what I want the part 2 to fully look like yet.
Yeah.
But I think this was really, really helpful for me to even think through because you brought up a lot of themes that I might want to start adding into the show.
Sweet. So, well, let's get those themes added and then I'll come on for a part 3.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. 100%.
Awesome. Thanks again for having me on. It was great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Where can people find you?
You can find me in lots of places. The benefit of having the last name Eicheldinger is I'm an easy guy to find because there's not a lot of us. You can find me at matteicheldinger.com. You can find me at Matt Eicheldinger on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you again so much for being here. This was so much fun, and I'm serious. We will definitely have a part 3.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening. Please be sure that you are following That Nerd Thing in your favorite podcast app so that you never miss an episode. And I would love it if you could please leave That Nerd Thing a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you're watching the podcast on YouTube, please be sure to subscribe and like this video. You can get in touch with me via email at thatnerdthingpod@gmail.com. And you can follow the show on Instagram and TikTok at thatnerdthingpod. And be sure to share the show with your nerdy friends. And we'll see you next time for our part 3 episode. Bye.